I caught her on camera laughing after she destroyed my mailbox for the 4th time, on purpose. That's when I knew this wasn't about mail. It was about power. But what I did next? Let's just say, she never saw it coming, and you won't believe how it ends. I've lived on this street longer than most of the trees lining it. 15 good years, 15 quiet ones, where neighbors waved from porches, kids biked until sunset, and Saturdays meant burgers, beers, and lawn chairs at the end of the cul-de-sac. My mailbox stood at the curb like a proud soldier, solid cedar, hand-painted with care by my late wife and me back when we first moved in, back when building something together meant everything. That mailbox wasn't just a box for letters. It was a piece of memory, of time, of us. It stood strong through snowstorms and heat waves and stood untouched by anything other than the occasional flyer or the morning paper. But then she moved in. Her name is Janet, but everyone calls her Karen now. And believe me, she earned it. Barely a month into her new house at the bend in the road, and she had already declared herself queen of the HOA. She strutted around with a clipboard and measuring tape like she was planning a military invasion. First came the notes, passive-aggressive slips of paper about lawn height, trash can placement, and the color of porch lights. People grumbled, but most stayed polite. Me? I minded my business. I figured she was just one of those people who liked control. I didn't know then that I'd be her next target. The first hit came early one morning. I walked out, coffee in hand, and found the mailbox tilted like a drunken soldier, scraped, dented, and clearly sideswiped. No note, no apology. I assumed it was an accident. Maybe she misjudged her backing out. Maybe she was distracted. I fixed it, shrugged it off. But it happened again the following week, only worse. This time the entire post had been knocked almost flat, as if something large had rammed into it and didn't stop. And again, nothing. Just the echo of silence and a faint scent of arrogance on the breeze. I replaced it again, reinforced it with extra brackets, not because I feared her, but because I still believed maybe it wasn't intentional. Then came the 3rd time. I was on the porch tightening the hinges on the screen door when I heard the crunch. Not a fender bender sound. No, this was deliberate. I turned just in time to see her massive SUV finish rolling right over the base of my mailbox. She didn't flinch. She looked directly at me, hand resting casually on the steering wheel, and smiled. That kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The kind you give someone when you want them to know you're in control and they can't do a thing about it. That was the moment it all changed. That was when I stopped seeing this as an accident and started recognizing it for what it was. A message. A challenge. A power play. I walked down the steps, heart pounding not with fear, but with something deeper. Anger, yes, but also sadness. This mailbox wasn't just wood and screws. It was dignity. It was mine. I asked her plainly and calmly if she realized she'd just hit my mailbox. She raised an eyebrow, gave me a theatrical shrug, and said, "Well, maybe you should put it somewhere safer." That's when I understood what kind of person I was dealing with. She didn't care. She wasn't even trying to pretend anymore. And in that moment, something inside me said no. No more. I wasn't going to roll over, but I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just nodded slowly and walked back up my driveway. And that night I didn't sleep. I stayed up thinking. Not about revenge, but about justice. About standing up. About what it means to protect what's yours when someone goes out of their way to destroy it for the sake of ego and control. If you've ever felt like someone tried to step on your name, your work, your history, just because they thought they could, then you know what I felt that night. And if this story is already hitting something in you, do me a favor. Click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell notification to all, because trust me, this story's only just getting started. I spent the next morning carefully inspecting the damage and thinking back to every time I'd stayed silent when someone stepped out of line. No more. This time I was going to respond, but not the way Karen expected. She thought she could bully me into backing down. What she didn't know is that I grew up with older brothers who taught me a different kind of strength, not the loud, kind, but the steady kind. The kind that lets a man bide his time, learn from the hits, and hit back smarter. What I did next? Well, let's just say it changed everything on this block. But I'll tell you this. When Karen saw what I installed, in place of that old mailbox, the look on her face said it all. It wasn't fear. It was disbelief, and she had no idea what was coming next. I walked right up to her that morning, heart steady, voice calm, every instinct in me telling me to keep my cool even as my blood boiled beneath the surface. And I asked the question any decent person would have asked. Did you realize you hit my mailbox? She looked up from her phone with this slow, theatrical smirk and laughed. Laughed. Right in my face like I was some kind of punchline in her private joke. Well, maybe you should put it somewhere safer, she said, like it wasn't sitting in the exact same legal HOA-approved spot it had occupied for over a decade without issue. I reminded her of that, calmly, even pointed out the city code. She didn't blink. She crossed her arms and leaned against that massive SUV like she owned the street and said, "Well, maybe it's time we reviewed some HOA guidelines, neighbor." That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with a careless driver. I was dealing with a calculated bully. She wasn't just wrecking my mailbox. She was declaring war. And I was about to find out just how deep she'd sink. Within a week, I got 3 different letters from the HOA. The first accused me of having unsightly mailbox damage. The second flagged a tiny decorative flag my granddaughter made for me, a little wooden eagle she painted herself, calling it a non-compliant lawn ornament. And the third? Improper trash can placement. My trash cans were behind the side gate, same spot they'd always been. But suddenly, every little thing I did was under the microscope. And it wasn't just paper. Karen started walking the block with her clipboard again, and every time she passed my house, she'd slow down, stare, scribble, and smirk. I watched her one morning pretending to take photos of her rose bushes while angling her phone at my front yard. This wasn't oversight. This was personal. And the real betrayal? The HOA backed her up. Not because she was right, but because she was on the board. That little title gave her all the power she needed to twist the rules and punish anyone who dared question her authority. And I guess I became the prime example. Make an example out of the guy who stands up for himself, and maybe no one else will. I fixed the mailbox again, but this time, I added steel brackets inside the post, reinforced the base, and anchored it deeper. I even repainted it, made it look brand new. Maybe, just maybe, she'd move on. A week later, I stepped outside with my coffee and stopped cold. The post was sheared clean in half like someone had taken a sledgehammer or an SUV bumper and slammed it with all they had. Bits of wood were scattered across the grass. My flagpole was bent sideways, and there, directly across the street, was Karen, standing in her driveway with a fresh cup of coffee, hair perfect, robe pressed, grinning like she just won a game I didn't know I was playing. And that's when something inside me snapped. Not in a rage, but in that way a man knows he's been pushed to the wall one time too many. This wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. This was about dignity, about someone trying to strip away your peace bit by bit until you either submit or stand. I didn't say a word. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I walked back inside and sat down at my kitchen table, stared out the window at that pile of broken cedar and bent steel, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to rebuild it again, not the way she expected. I was going to install something she'd never see coming. But first I did my research, hours of it. I started reading up on mailbox laws, on legal reinforcements, on ways to protect property while staying well within the rules. Turns out, there are solutions people have used for decades to keep vandals and snowplows from destroying their boxes. Steel core posts disguised to look like wood, concrete-filled bases hidden inside decorative shells. I took notes. I drew sketches. I planned every inch. But I didn't just want to fix the mailbox. I wanted to fix what she'd broken inside me, my belief that bullies only win when good people stay quiet. If any of you watching have ever had someone come into your life and try to take your peace, your pride, your hard-earned home, then you know exactly what this feels like. You know it's not about mail or rules. It's about respect. And if that hits home, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that bell notification to all so you don't miss the next chapter of this story, because it's about to get wild. The night after the fourth destruction, I began building something not just strong, but smart. I can't give away too much yet, because what I created changed everything. And Karen, she had no idea what was waiting for her the next time she got behind the wheel. Let's just say when she rolled up to my property again, thinking she could get away with one more hit and run. What happened next shook her so hard, she called the police. And that was just the beginning. I dove into that mailbox project like a man preparing for war, not just to repair something physical, but to reclaim the dignity this woman had tried to strip from me over the past few months. I wasn't building a mailbox anymore. I was building a message, and that message was clear. You don't get to bully people just because you wear a fake smile and sit on an HOA board. My research took me down some fascinating rabbit holes, forums full of rural folks who'd had their mailboxes taken out by pranksters swinging baseball bats from truck windows, or snowplow drivers with bad aim and no accountability. That's where I found the perfect solution. A concrete-filled steel pipe, sunk deep, 4 feet into the earth, camouflaged to look like nothing more than a quaint wooden post. It was perfectly legal, too, as long as the dimensions matched standard specifications. I spent an entire weekend crafting it, every layer of paint, every brushstroke on the thin cedar shell designed to lull someone into thinking it was the same old mailbox she'd flattened half a dozen times already. I didn't cut corners. I measured the setback from the curb to the inch, checked local ordinances twice, and even photographed the whole process for documentation. This wasn't vengeance, it was preparation. I'd been pushed, humiliated, and disrespected, but now I was ready, and I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, barely midweek, I was sipping my coffee by the window when I heard it. Not a little bump, not a scratch. No, this was impact. That unmistakable crunch of plastic and steel, meeting something that didn't give an inch. I ran outside just in time to see her standing next to her behemoth SUV, staring wide-eyed at the front bumper, which now sported a deep crater and a partially dislodged grille. For the first time, she didn't have a smirk. She looked pale, almost shaken. "Your mailbox destroyed my car," she shrieked, pointing at the post like it had committed a crime. I took a breath, steadied myself, and said, "You hit my property. Again. Maybe you should put your vehicle somewhere safer." The silence between us crackled. Her eyes darted, unsure whether to scream or cry. She didn't say another word, just got back in her wounded SUV and drove off like she was escaping. A crime scene, but I knew what was coming. She might have been rattled, but Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds quietly. She'd be back, and this time, she'd come armed with the one weapon she loved more than her coffee, the HOA rulebook. And sure enough, 2 days later I got the envelope, an official letter citing me for installing an unauthorized structure and potential safety hazard on the curb. They claimed someone had filed a complaint about my new mailbox's construction, saying it could cause damage to vehicles. Imagine that. The same woman who'd rammed my property over and over was now trying to accuse me of creating a hazard. I sat down at my desk, opened my documentation folder, and pulled out everything: photos, measurements, ordinances, time-stamped receipts. I wasn't just ready, I was unbreakable. I showed up to the next HOA meeting with a binder in hand and a calm smile on my face. As she launched into her dramatic speech about dangerous neighborhood fixtures, I waited patiently, letting her talk. Then I laid out my case. I showed them the legality, the measurements, the installation photos. I even played them the security footage I'd installed after the third mailbox accident. Footage that clearly showed her vehicle crossing over the curb and striking my post. The room went quiet, real quiet. Even the HOA president, who usually backed her no matter what, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Karen's face? Pure fire. She'd expected me to roll over, to get fined, maybe even forced to take it down. But instead, I'd handed them the truth on a silver platter. And it burned. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That justice prevailed and the story wrapped up with a nice bow. But no, Karen doesn't lose gracefully. And when someone like her feels cornered, they don't surrender. They plot. That weekend, I noticed strange cars driving slowly by my house, people I didn't recognize snapping photos. Then I started getting calls from the city, anonymous complaints about noise, about unauthorized construction, even a claim that I was running a business out of my garage. None of it stuck, but the message was clear. The game wasn't over. It was just entering a new phase. And that's why I need your help, folks. If you've been following this story and it's fired you up, if you've ever faced someone who weaponized rules to bully good people, now's the time to stand with me. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click that bell icon and set it to all so you never miss an episode. Because what happened next made everything so far look like child's play. The twist that came, I never saw it coming. Karen wasn't just acting on her own, she had help. And when I found out who had been feeding her information about me behind the scenes, it turned my whole world upside down. She really thought she'd won. After smashing into my reinforced mailbox and causing a crater in her SUV, Karen stormed off like a victim and did exactly what I predicted. She weaponized her favorite tool, the HOA. Just days later, a letter arrived accusing me of creating a hazardous structure that was hostile to community safety. The irony was enough to make me laugh out loud. After all the damage she'd done, now I was being accused of endangering the neighborhood. But I wasn't shaken. Not this time. Because while Karen had been busy playing her passive-aggressive games, I'd been quietly preparing. I'd spent weeks documenting everything, photos of the original mailbox damage, timestamps from the day of each accident, and a thick binder of printed HOA guidelines proving my mailbox placement was fully compliant. But the best piece of evidence? My doorbell camera. High resolution, wide angle, motion activated. It captured the moment she slammed into the new post and the look of shock on her face when she realized it didn't budge an inch. Clear as daylight. This wasn't just a defense, it was a counterpunch. So when the next HOA meeting rolled around, I didn't show up angry. I walked in calmly, confidently, binder in hand. Karen was already seated at the front, arms crossed, surrounded by her usual clique, the ones who always nodded a little too fast when she spoke. She didn't even look at me, just rolled her eyes as if I were wasting everyone's time. But I didn't respond. I simply took a breath, stepped forward, and asked if I could have 5 minutes to address the board. The room quieted. I handed each member a folder, neatly organized documentation showing the mailbox's legal placement, photos of the reinforced structure, and printouts of the city codes. Then, I pulled out my tablet, connected it to the screen, and hit play. The footage began. It showed Karen backing up, clear view of her SUV crossing the property line, and then, bam, full impact with the mailbox. You could hear the crunch of metal, then a moment of stillness, and finally, her expression, stunned, furious, guilty. The silence in that room was deafening. One neighbor gasped. Another leaned over and whispered not quietly enough. She did it on purpose. The HOA president, a man who'd always seemed to nod along with Karen's complaints in the past, suddenly looked like he'd swallowed a golf ball. His face went pale. You could see the realization hit him. He'd been backing the wrong horse this whole time. Karen tried to object. She said the footage was edited, that the mailbox was camouflaged to trap drivers. But it didn't matter. The evidence was too overwhelming. And when I calmly reminded them that I had received multiple citations for mailbox damage she'd caused, while she'd never once left a note or taken responsibility, you could feel the tide turn in the room. No more nodding, no more polite silence. For once, people actually looked at her the way she'd trained them to look at me. A few board members glanced at each other. The president cleared his throat and said the HOA would drop all pending complaints and review the conduct of board members for potential misconduct. That was it. No apology, no dramatic showdown. But I didn't need one. I knew what that sentence really meant. And the best part? A week later, a notice went out. Karen had officially resigned from the HOA board. No explanation given, no farewell message, just a quiet exit. Her SUV didn't appear in the driveway for nearly a month. It was in the shop, apparently. When it did come back, it was sporting a brand new bumper and grille, but the shine was gone. Karen didn't wave anymore. She didn't look anyone in the eye. The queen of the cul-de-sac had been dethroned by her own arrogance. And just when I thought the worst was behind me, when I finally felt like justice had prevailed, I got a knock on my door that flipped the script all over again. It was the HOA president, alone, no clipboard, no warning letter, just a grim look on his face. He said, "We need to talk. Something's come up. Something about the footage." I asked what he meant, but he wouldn't say more. Just that it involved someone else in the neighborhood and that things might get complicated. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a feud between me and Karen. There was something deeper going on, something about that camera footage I hadn't even noticed. And if you want to know what was hiding in plain sight, something that could turn this whole neighborhood upside down, then you need to stick with me. Let's just say, Karen wasn't the only one who'd been caught on camera that day. And what I saw next left me speechless. Peace returned in the quietest, most satisfying way. No fireworks, no showdowns, just a stillness I hadn't felt in months. The mailbox, my concrete-clad silent sentinel, still stands today exactly where it always has, not a scratch on it since that day Karen met her match. It's become almost symbolic now, a reminder that you don't always need to raise your voice to be heard. The passive-aggressive notes vanished, as if someone had flipped a switch. The lawn inspections, the trash can citations, the HOA letters, filled with vague language and veiled threats, they all dried up. Karen, once the self-appointed queen of control, retreated into the shadows of her own two-story home. No more early morning patrols, no more smug glances from behind tinted SUV windows. She became just another face behind drawn curtains, living in the same neighborhood but no longer trying to run it. I still see her sometimes, peeking through blinds, watching the same mailbox she once tried to destroy. Except now, she never gets too close. And funny enough, the rest of the HOA followed suit. Their tone softened. Their meetings became shorter, less combative. The new board president even stopped by one afternoon to ask how I reinforced the mailbox, not in a confrontational way, but with genuine curiosity. "Maybe we should share that design," he said, half smiling, "for future use." And I knew then, the war was over. But here's what I learned. When someone keeps running over your peace, it's okay to draw the line. And sometimes that line needs to be made of steel and concrete. Not to hurt someone, not to provoke, but to remind them that dignity is not something you can back into with an SUV and walk away from without consequence. I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect. I wanted to be able to step out onto my porch, sip my coffee, and not worry if today was the day my mailbox got flattened. Again, like some twisted Groundhog Day. And the truth is, I didn't win by yelling or threatening. I won by being smarter, calmer, and more prepared. I documented the truth. I stood firm when it would have been easier to give in. And I built something so strong and so cleverly disguised that it made a bully finally stop in her tracks. If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is. And hey, if you're still watching and this story hit home, even just a little, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that bell notification set to all so you never miss what's coming next because, folks, we're just getting started. You see, the story should have ended there. The mailbox was safe, Karen was silent, the HOA went quiet. But remember that knock at my door? The one from the HOA president? He told me something I haven't been able to shake. Something about that doorbell footage I played at the meeting, the one that showed Karen hitting the mailbox. Turns out I wasn't the only one caught up in this war. In the background of that video, just barely visible, was something strange. A shadow behind the fence of my neighbor, Rick, the one who always claimed he worked late, the one whose backyard gate had been mysteriously busted a few weeks prior. When I went back and rewatched the footage frame by frame, there it was. A figure, moving, fast, carrying something under his arm, and then disappearing behind Karen's house. The HOA president noticed it too. That's why he came over, not just to check in, but to ask if I had more footage from that day. He said another neighbor had filed a theft report that same morning. Something valuable, gone. And the time of the report? Less than 10 minutes after Karen hit the mailbox. So while all eyes were on my concrete mailbox and her crumpled bumper, something else was happening just a few doors down. And that's when it hit me. What if the whole mailbox saga wasn't just about HOA politics or power trips? What if someone was using it as cover for something else entirely? Something criminal? And worse, what if Karen knew, or was helping? If you thought this story was just about a mailbox, think again. Because in the next episode, I'm going to show you exactly what that footage revealed, frame by frame. And trust me, what I found could change how you look at HOA drama forever. Sometimes the fight isn't about winning. It's about standing up when no one else will. It's about proving that respect can't be run over, and that truth, when documented and delivered right, can speak louder than any SUV bumper ever could. If this story hit you in the gut or reminded you of a time you had to stand your ground, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the bell and set it to all so you never miss what's coming next. Because trust me, this was just the beginning. The mailbox may be standing tall, but what I uncovered next will shake this whole neighborhood. You don't want to miss it.